Happy New Year! Unless you were in Puerto Rico last night. Just as fireworks were meant to light up the sky, the island was plunged into darkness. A massive power outage, starting at 5:30 in the morning, left most of Puerto Rico without electricity on New Year's Eve. Imagine that, trying to cook your grandma's famous New Year's Eve feast in the dark, or ringing in the new year with nothing but the faint glow of your emergency flashlight. This wasn't a scene from a dystopian movie, folks. It was a harsh reality for the people of Puerto Rico, who are, frankly, getting used to this kind of thing. The outage, which initially affected a staggering 90% of the island, served as a grim reminder of the fragility of Puerto Rico's power grid. This wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a full-blown crisis. And let's be clear, this wasn't some freak accident caused by a flock of iguanas on a power line. Although, to be fair, iguanas have caused blackouts in Puerto Rico before. This time, the culprit was a failure in an underground power line operated by Luma Energy, the private company responsible for transmitting and distributing electricity on the island. You know what they say, New Year, same old power grid problems, except this time, it happened on New Year's Eve, which, you have to admit, adds a certain theatrical flair to the whole debacle. Luma Energy, remember that name because it's synonymous with power outage in Puerto Rico. They swooped in with promises of a brighter future, a modernized grid, and fewer blackouts. They even had a catchy slogan, Luma lighting the way. Well, more like Luma dimming the lights, am I right? Since taking over the grid in 2021, Luma has been plagued by accusations of mismanagement, sky-high electricity rates, and oh yeah, constant blackouts. They're like that friend who promises to make you a delicious meal, and then sets your kitchen on fire. The people of Puerto Rico deserve better than burnt dinners and unreliable electricity. This latest blackout just added fuel to the fire. It exposed the deep-seated problems with Luma's operation and the ongoing vulnerability of Puerto Rico's power infrastructure. Basically, the entire island was running on a hope and a prayer, and as we saw on New Year's Eve, that's not a sustainable energy plan. The situation raises serious questions about Luma's competence and their ability to deliver on their promises. It's like hiring a contractor to fix your leaky roof, only to have them accidentally demolish your entire house. At some point you have to ask yourself, are they even trying? As the hours ticked by and the new year dawned, millions of Puerto Ricans were left wondering when they could finally turn on their lights and their blenders. Because, let's be real, what's a New Year's Day without a refreshing smoothie? Restoration efforts were underway, but progress was frustratingly slow. By New Year's Day, roughly half of the island had power restored. It was a race against time, with crews working around the clock to fix the damaged infrastructure and appease a rightfully frustrated population. Adding to the drama, Puerto Rico had a new governor in town. Jennifer Gonzalez, who was sworn in just days before the blackout, immediately found herself in crisis mode. She vowed to hold Luma accountable, promising to form an energy task force and even hinting at the possibility of finding a new operator for the grid. Bold words, Governor, bold words. Meanwhile, President Biden, never one to miss a photo op, offered federal assistance. He pledged to support Puerto Rico in its time of need, which is great and all, but let's not forget that the island is still recovering from Hurricane Maria, which devastated its power grid back in 2017. It's like putting a band-aid on a bullet wound and calling it a day. Speaking of Hurricane Maria, let's talk about the elephant in the room, or rather, the hurricane in the power grid. Maria, a Category 5 storm, ripped through Puerto Rico in 2017, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. It was the deadliest natural disaster to hit U.S. territory in a century, and it dealt a devastating blow to the island's already fragile infrastructure. The power grid was decimated, plunging Puerto Rico into darkness for months. It was the longest blackout in U.S. history, a grim record that still stands today. While much of the grid was eventually restored, the scars of Maria run deep. The storm exposed the systemic neglect and underinvestment in Puerto Rico's power infrastructure. Years of deferred maintenance, outdated equipment, and inadequate funding had left the grid vulnerable and ill-equipped to withstand a major storm. It was a disaster waiting to happen, and when Maria hit, the consequences were catastrophic. The New Year's Eve blackout was a stark reminder that the ghosts of Maria still linger. It showed that despite billions of dollars in aid and promises of a more resilient grid, Puerto Rico remains acutely vulnerable to power outages. Section 5. The people have spoken, public outrage, and calls for accountability. Here's a fun fact. Apagar la luz means turn off the light in Spanish. It's also what the people of Puerto Rico want to do to Luma Energy. Can you blame them? The New Year's Eve blackout sparked outrage and frustration across the island. People took to the streets, protesting Luma's handling of the situation and demanding accountability. They held signs, chanted slogans, and made their voices heard. Social media exploded with angry posts, memes, and videos. People shared their experiences, vented their frustrations, and called for change. It was a collective outpouring of anger and despair, fueled by years of power outages, sky-high electricity bills, and a sense that their concerns were being ignored. The message was clear. Enough is enough. The people of Puerto Rico deserve a reliable and affordable power grid. They deserve a brighter future, not one shrouded in darkness and uncertainty. Section 6. A canary in the coal mine. Could this happen on the mainland? Now, you might be thinking, that's sad about Puerto Rico and all, but I live in insert state here, and we have like actual power plants and stuff. And to that I say, hold your horses, buckaroo, because what's happening in Puerto Rico should be a wake-up call for the entire United States. Think of Puerto Rico as the canary in the coal mine. Its struggling power grid is a stark warning sign of the vulnerabilities plaguing power systems across the country. The truth is, America's power grid is a patchwork of aging infrastructure, outdated technology, and increasingly frequent extreme weather events. It's a recipe for disaster, and it's not a matter of if but when a major blackout will hit the mainland. Remember the Texas deep freeze in 2021? Millions without power, skyrocketing energy prices, and a whole lot of frozen iguanas. Or the California wildfires, fueled by drought and neglected power lines that caused rolling blackouts and forced thousands to evacuate their homes. These events should serve as a stark reminder that no one is immune to the risks of a failing power grid. Section 7. The price of inaction, economic fallout, and quality of life concerns. Okay, so we've established that America's power grid is basically being held together by duct tape and prayers. But what does that actually mean for you, the average American who enjoys the simple pleasure of turning on a light switch without worrying about plunging into darkness? Well, for starters, blackouts are expensive, like really expensive. The economic impact of power outages in the United States is estimated to be billions of dollars per year. Businesses lose productivity, supply chains get disrupted, and people miss work. It's a lose-lose situation for everyone involved. But beyond the economic costs, there's also a significant impact on our quality of life. Imagine not being able to charge your phone, watch Netflix, or even flush your toilet because the power is out. It's inconvenient at best and life-threatening at worst, especially for vulnerable populations like the elderly and those who rely on medical devices. And as climate change intensifies, bringing with it more extreme weather events, the frequency and severity of power outages are only going to increase. So yeah, it's time to start paying attention. Section 8. Beyond Band-Aid Solutions, a roadmap for a resilient grid. So, how do we fix this mess? The answer, my friends, is not simple. It's going to require a massive investment in modernizing our power grid, transitioning to cleaner and more resilient energy sources, and strengthening our defenses against cyber attacks and extreme weather events. First and foremost, we need to stop relying on outdated and vulnerable infrastructure. That means investing in smart grid technologies, upgrading transmission lines, and burying power lines underground where they're less susceptible to damage from storms and falling trees. Second, we need to embrace renewable energy sources like solar, wind, and geothermal. Not only are these sources better for the environment, but they're also more resilient than traditional fossil fuel plants. By diversifying our energy mix, we can create a more robust and reliable power grid. And finally, we need to prioritize cybersecurity. As our power grid becomes increasingly digitized, it's more vulnerable than ever to cyber attacks. We need to invest in robust cybersecurity measures to protect our critical infrastructure from hackers and terrorists. Section 9. A call to action. Investing in our energy future. The bottom line is this. America's power grid is at a crossroads. We can continue to kick the can down the road, ignoring the warning signs and hoping for the best. Or we can take action now, investing in a more modern, resilient, and sustainable energy future. This isn't just a technical issue, it's a political one. It requires leadership from our elected officials, who need to prioritize investing in our energy infrastructure and tackling climate change. It requires engagement from citizens who need to demand better from their leaders and hold them accountable. The future of our country quite literally depends on it. So let's stop bickering about whether climate change is real and start working together to create a brighter, more resilient future for all Americans. Because the only thing worse than a blackout is knowing we could have prevented it.